Hey guys, welcome to tonight's React. I know the game was several hours ago. Um, they had one job to do, and I know I've said that earlier, but this was the kind of game where you almost wish both teams could lose, and then it was very, very close. It was like 15, 16 seconds away from being a tie, which actually would have been the next best thing because the Browns are mired in misery, and there was some other things that had nothing to do with football that made this a hell of a lot more entertaining and comical than it should have been. And I hate Tom Brady. Let's be honest. I've never been a fan of his. Um, this was the only time I want to say in my entire life that I may have actually cheered for Tom Brady. Um, just because I want the Browns to basically be as miserable and as terrible as humanly possible this season for what's actually coming next week. But we'll touch on that here in a bit. Let's actually just get right into it. As you can see, the Browns do beat the Bucks 23-7 in OT. Next week, the Browns are in Houston. Tampa Bay at 5-6 still leads that god awful NFC South and actually hosts the New Orleans Saints with first place essentially um, on the line. Now they're in a battle with Atlanta right now, um, but that would actually give them the lead in the division if they win that one next Monday night. The Browns came out. Put a good drive together. Anthony Schwartz finally did something positive this year. I know it's amazing. Um, and newsworthy on top of it. Hang on one second. There we go. Did not have another one of my lights on here. But went right down the field on the opening drive. Um, and then Schwartz on a essentially a double reverse scores from 31 yards out. Browns go up 7-0, and you know off to the races. Let's actually see what happens in Jacoby Brissett's last game as a starter for this team, which is the absolute wrong play because it's not his fault that the Browns are now are 4-7. Yes, he did actually have a couple of costly key interceptions down the stretch in games. So two of those losses I can actually put on him, for the possibility of winning. That still actually makes them, 6-5 at that point. But it's also he wasn't part of the defense. One of those games he did, force late against the Jets, but it was not his fault that number one, that nobody knew that the Jets were going to be this good, and number two, that the defense was going to surrender two touchdowns in 90 seconds. Um, but the Browns and let's actually put up the ticker here. Brissett was 23 of 37 for 210 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Do not take that interception with as much standing as you would think. It was on a Hail Mary at the end of the first half. So pretty much it's going to show up on the score sheet as an interception, but another consistently clean game from Brissett. Had a couple of really good quarterback scrambles in this one. Let's actually adjust this here for one brief moment. But Nick Chubb finally got back to form, 26 carries, 116 yards, and the game-winning touchdown in overtime. It's a lot better than that 19-yard performance he put up against the Bills Mafia a week ago when, they really didn't know where they were going to be playing. Amari Cooper, 7 catches for 94 yards. On one that I don't have listed here, David Njoku had another solid game. Njoku actually with 5 catches for 29 yards, was targeted 7 times. His longest catch was 12 yards, and it was one that the Browns had to have. It was a spectacular one-handed catch in the back of the end zone with the Browns facing 4th and 10 at the Tampa 12 with under 2 minutes to go. naturally, if that ball is incomplete, and quite honestly, they could have also called pass interference on that play, and Njoku still came down with probably the best catch of his career to this point. A lot of people are going to think where he went to leap up over a defender, and then 3 or 4 offensive linemen pushed him into the end zone against Cincinnati a couple of years ago. But this is easily the best play of David Njoku's career, and he is certainly earning that contract. Tom Brady, 29 of 43 for 246 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not, it's good for Brady's standards, but it was a ton of dink and dunk. He was sacked 3 times. 2 of those were by Myles Garrett. Quarterback rating of 97.6, very consistent for him. 5.7 yards per completion. Same thing with Jacoby. Brady had 1 rush for 2 yards, and Jacoby had 2 rushes for 27, including a key 17-yard run to keep one of the late drives alive for the Browns. Rachaad White, 14 carries, 64 yards. And then Chris Godwin had himself a game. 12 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown, with the longest being of 23. Rachaad White also had 9 catches for 45 yards. Again, a lot of dink and dunk. Julio Jones, 3 catches for 40 yards, so very good on the Browns for keeping him limited. Mike Evans, only 2 catches for 31 yards. So all of that talent, and Chris Godwin is the guy who went off. And again, Denzel Ward matched up on a few of those guys. Whereas Njoku is playing himself, is playing at a level deserving of his contract. Denzel Ward is still probably the biggest disappointment on the Cleveland Browns franchise in 2022. Cannot stay healthy. Did actually get knocked out of the game and did return, but got burned several times as well. Case in point, there was one play where Tampa everyone thought that they were going to just take a knee right near the end of the half or late in the game, and Ward just literally had his hands in his fanny pack warmer that was actually behind his back, coming up to the line, and half-assed played the ball, and it ended up going for a big gain. And thankfully that Tampa got knocked out of field goal range, had a penalty. Myles Garrett had a sack, and they were forced to punt, which eventually turned into the Browns' game-winning drive to end overtime. But again, another, I felt, very poor game out of Denzel Ward. He did have 5 solo tackles, but he didn't do another damn thing the rest of the day. Martin Emerson had a much better game, 3 tackles, and he had 4 pass defenses in reserve with that. Going over some of the Jadeveon Clowney had a half sack. Jordan Elliott had a sack. Myles Garrett had 1.5. Garrett actually quipped earlier in the week with the media that Brady retired and then unretired because Myles Garrett wanted another chance to sack him. Well, he actually was living in the backfield for a good chunk of the game, because there were a couple of holding calls where Garrett got roped that he ended up drawing as well. For Tampa, they ended up having 4 sacks themselves. Devin White had 8 solo tackles and a half sack. Levante David, 5 tackles. Keanu Neal, 4 tackles and a half sack. Antoine Winfield Jr., 5 tackles, but got knocked out of the game with injury and did not return. This game was very close for a lot longer than it should have been. As you can see, the Browns did win the total yard battle by a slim margin. Tampa Bay still got nearly 100 yards rushing. The Browns got back to what they do best on the strength of Chubb's 116 yards. With those 189 total, 178 passing, 229 for Tampa. The late yardage efficiency, both teams really not all that efficient at all. As you can see, both teams well under 30%, or hovering right around 30, between 30 and 35% on third down. And this was a game that featured a lot of punting. Cody Bohork has earned his check today, and we're going to cover that here in a moment, because it was one of his punts that basically decided the outcome in this game in overtime. Browns 2 of 4 on fourth down. Tampa had was 1 of 1. Cade York in the special teams game, 1 of 2 on field goals, missed from 39 in the second quarter. He's certainly not he's certainly not deserving of a fourth round pick with the way that he's had kicks missed and blocked in the last few weeks. As a matter of fact, the miss in the second quarter, Tampa got a field goal on the ensuing drive. In the return game, though, the Browns special teams outside of the York missed field goal were very solid, because Cleveland had 142 yards in kick return coverage. They had 75 punt return yards and 67 on kickoff. Tampa Bay only had 2 punt returns for 24 yards and did not register a kick return, because every time that York kicked off, it ended up somewhere in the the second row. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, 2 very good punt returns. He nearly broke one that ended up going for 29 yards. Jerome Ford had a 39-yard return that put the Browns in fantastic field position out near midfield. But it was Bohorquez in overtime that had a key 65-yard punt. The Browns were punting from inside their own 15, a 65-yard punt, and then Tampa also ends up getting a block above the waist penalty on top of that, so it backs them up inside their own 20. It flips the entire field. Tampa stalls out, punts, and then the Browns go down the field and get the winning score. But now we've actually got to talk about the ugly and the bad. We've talked about the good. The other part of the good here is look at the time of possession battle. The Browns had nearly a 10-minute time of possession advantage in this. And if you actually have nearly a 10-minute advantage, it means that you should be dominating this game. And that certainly, for whatever reason, was not the case. You can say it was the Brady factor. You can call a number of different things. Browns actually chewed up a bunch of clock, had long grinding drives on each of their scoring drives. But it was also something that if you're going to have a 9.5-minute lead, you better damn well put a few extra points on the board here. But again, the late yardage efficiency forced you to punt a lot more than you should have. There were some penalties that still needed to be cleaned up, but that's the bad. The ugly were the 2 off-field incidents that occurred with this. Everyone saw on TV earlier this, or it was reported in the news earlier this week, and it was blatantly evident. I'm not sure if it was covered on the broadcast, because I ended up tuning into the TV broadcast late. It's on Fox, which I don't get, so I had to actually pull up, some sort of third-party type stream or something. And I was kind of out and about at through the first few minutes of the game, so I'm not sure if they brought it up on the pregame or if Jim Donovan and Nathan Zagura brought it up in the first few minutes of the broadcast. But you can clearly see the marks on the field from when somebody broke into First Energy Stadium and basically turfed up the field. You could certainly see several donut marks in there. The second thing was that right before halftime, it was reported that a skunk of all things invaded section 140, which is in the upper part of the lower bowl. It was on the east end of the stadium, which is the side opposite the dog pound. It was in the open end of the stadium. And again, this was just before halftime. They did get I did not hear any reports of the skunk actually spraying. They were able to get it out. They did kind of clear out that area. How apropos is that somebody turfs the field, there's a skunk in the stands, and they end up going out and beating Tom Brady of all damn things, towards the end of overtime. It was bonus football. The I will say, as much as I really did not want to pay attention to this game, that fourth quarter and overtime period was entertaining as hell. Um, and again, this is the game that really I could have cared less about more than any game on the Brown schedule. Last week against the Bills was the one I was looking forward to most. This is the one I was looking forward to without a doubt the least. This is I've made this analogy on the Wise Guys show before. This was a syphilis versus gonorrhea type game, which is the lesser of two evils, as far as you're concerned, and you actually have to watch it. The Browns are now 4-7, and now we have to turn to the elephant in the room. Their next game, as you can see there, they're in Houston next Sunday to play the Texans, who are the worst team in the NFL. And oh yeah, pudding pops, Bill Cosby, Deshaun Cosby, whatever you want to call him, Deshaun Watson's 11-game suspension is officially over as of 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. He has now been able to practice. He will now be moved into the starting role. He will have, and 1 week from tonight, he will be playing his first game in over 700 days. Again, remember, he was hurt, then he has to be traded, then he got suspended, and also in there, he ended up quitting on his teammates. Yeah, real classy guy. And let's also remember, suspended 11 games for being a pervert, and a serial pervert, and a repeat pervert. I put this out on Twitter and Facebook. If there is any sort of poetic justice whatsoever, if anyone saw the movie The Longest Yard, if you remember, and I'm talking the remake with Adam Sandler and Burt Reynolds and Bill Goldberg and Kevin Nash, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When it was actually found, when it was thought that Paul Crewe was fixing the game, his entire offensive line, I should say, did not block for him for the first three snaps of the second half, or like third quarter, fourth quarter, whatever it is, sending a message. I would love to actually see something like that happen, and Watson breaks a rib or dislocates a shoulder or blows out a knee, and they say it's always bad juju and bad karma to wish ill upon somebody. You never really want to see somebody get hurt. Deshaun Watson deserves to get hurt. The fact that he's even playing at all this year, that the city of Houston decided not to charge him criminally for this because he was the franchise quarterback of their football team, is absolutely sickening and disgusting. But yeah, let me tell you how I really feel. I cannot wait for him to be booed. And I also love the fact that CBS is not sending either one of their top two broadcast teams to cover that game next Sunday in Houston. I believe they're sending Spiro's team. They're not even said they're not sending Ian Eagle. They're certainly not going to send Nance and Romo because this game doesn't warrant it. It's publicizing two teams that are not going to make the playoffs, that are near the bottom of their respective conferences. One of them being in the bottom of the entire NFL standing and is in track to get the number one overall pick. Matter of fact, I think they might be 2 losses away from clinching that number one overall pick already. And teams have still got 6 games left to go here. So yeah, anything that the networks and I know we're going to see all kinds of specials, and it's going to be talked about on radio, constantly here as next week gets closer. They're certainly going to do something on the CBS pregame show. We're going to see things all over ESPN leading into this. We're going to see things on Fox Sports. We'll see things on CBS Sports HQ about this. And it's now going to be rehashing old memories, and quite honestly, for the victims, it's going to be rehashing a lot of recent wounds, so to speak. So I'm hoping that they just, stop talking when Watson comes out on the field for the first time and gets booed absolutely out of the stadium there in Texas, in Houston. Naturally, they'll have to cut the mic when the profanities start coming. I would love to actually see some of the Texans players maybe try and cheap shot him a little bit, especially if they were former teammates of his, again, with the way that he quit on them. And the Browns essentially also now have to win out to even think about getting into the playoffs. They're 4-7. They have to win the next 6, and that gets them to 10-7. Because quite honestly, 9-8 is not going to get you in. 8-9 is certainly not going to get you in with the talent in the AFC right now. So this is, I would love if you had to put the end all be all checklist for next week. Booed out of the stadium, gets cheap shotted by a former teammate, gets injured, Browns lose to the worst team in the league, and are for all intents and purposes mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. At that point, they would end up being 4-8 with 5 games to go. And have no draft pick next year, no first round draft pick next year or the year after, because it's actually now going to the team that you're going to be playing against. So that team is not only going to have more than likely the number 1 or number 2 overall pick by then, but it's also something where they're going to have a second pick in the top 10 or 12. I mean, the only saving grace if you're a Browns fan is that if they turn this thing around and make a little bit of a run, you give up your first round pick next year as well. And then Houston's picking in the teens, low 20s if you end up making a playoff run. Will I be as bitter next season? Having let everything set, he serves his suspension, even if he got broken off for a full year. We'll have to wait and see on that. It's you can never say never. It's not something that it's not something you can compartmentalize. It's something that Mike and I did talk about on the Wise Guys a couple of episodes ago, is that if the Browns made a run or God forbid ever won a Super Bowl with this asshat at quarterback, this scumbag, this jackass, this predator, does it taint it at all? And for me, I don't know if I really could, because I was cheering for the Ravens when they won the Super Bowl, and Ray Lewis was there. Now Ray Lewis was an accomplice to what he did, but didn't actually commit the act. Deshaun Watson committed the act, allegedly 26 of them. Um, so we'll have to wait and see on that for next week, um, and even next year. So I will see. There's a chance that there will not be a reaction next week because we're going to be doing a special Sunday night edition of the Wise Guys next week after this game ends. We're going to be able to talk. The college football conference championship games will be done. We'll essentially have the basis of who the four are that are going to get in before the final uh, uh, announcement is made a week from tomorrow for who's going to be in the playoff, who the bowl games are all going to be, including the New Year's Six. Yesterday was absolutely beautiful. For me, as an Ohio State hater, certainly not a Michigan fan, but more of a Ohio State hater. And Mike will be, for the second year in a row, taking his lumps live on the air with me. So I will also already be, looking for that, and you'll definitely want to tune in to see that if you want to, because it's not very often the Rican gets his comeuppance here. Um, so if I get a chance to throw it back at him a little bit for how Buckeye centrics, some of his podcasts are. It's I'm gonna take advantage of that. It's Mike, if you're watching this or now or sometime before next Sunday, hey, if they actually go out and show up in the second half and finally beat Michigan, I'll be glad to take my lumps. But for the second year in a row, when the going got tough, they quit in the second half. And it was an absolutely gorgeous sight to see. So we'll actually talk about that next Sunday. We're gonna talk some Cavs, and then we'll try and get as much out of the way as we can because uh, our year end show on December 17th is essentially going to be a free for all. We're going to talk a little bit of sports for maybe for certainly the first segment, and then everything else is going to be completely off the board, completely randomized. We're going to have some guests on. And I hope everyone had themselves a great holiday. Can't wait until later on this week when things hopefully calm down a little bit at work, get the holiday shopping done. But I'm actually going to sign off here. I'm going to start getting ready for a very, very long day at work tomorrow. Finish up, watching a movie that I started here earlier today and just never got around to finishing. But again, I hope everyone had themselves a great holiday weekend. Try to actually get out and enjoy some of those deals if you can, today and tomorrow, and hopefully, um, hopefully everyone doesn't get strapped for the holidays this year, and hopefully if you're seeing things the way that I do with regards to who the Browns quarterback is as of 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Hopefully, we actually get Christmas to come early. So I will see you guys next week. Certainly with Mike, whether we again do whether we do a regular react. I'm still going to leave that to see how the Wise Guys show looks. It may actually end up going the following Monday, but I do actually have a live edition. I'm sorry, not a live edition, a normal version of the Sports Note coming here by Wednesday from something that happened over the weekend. I've got the framework. It's now just being able to get the time to finish it up. So I'm not going to do that tonight. I'll probably save that for tomorrow or Tuesday. So everybody, take care. Have yourself a great night, and we'll see you next weekend.